Well, I think most people realize that the gimmick that I've used throughout my career has been the King, Jerry the King Lawler, known worldwide. The man that I first got the crown and robe from originally was a guy by the name of Bobby Shane, and he was wrestling as King Bobby Shane back in the 70s, and I wound up with his crown and his robe after Bobby Shane died in a plane crash. For a long time, I of course, being from Memphis, Tennessee, called myself the King of Memphis, and I guess that was because Memphis is sort of famous for being the home of kings. Elvis Presley was from Memphis, and so that there was no confusion, I made everybody in my own hometown know that I was the King of Memphis, not Elvis. I'd been a wrestling fan all my life, and my next door neighbor, Mike Mashburn, and I would wrestle around my house, and we didn't have mats, we didn't have a ring or anything like that. We just go out in the backyard and wrestle. I guess it was the early days of backyard wrestling. And finally one day I met another young guy named Jerry Vickers who came along, and he told me about some, what we called in those days, I guess, outlaw wrestling matches. Just a little small independent organization that was run by an old ex-wrestler. I remember Jerry said, whatever you do, don't tell him you've never had a match, because he won't use you. He said, just tell him that you've wrestled some down in Florida or somewhere. And so that's what happened. Met the promoter, and first question he asked me was, how many matches you had? And I said, just a few. We wrestled some down in Florida. And then, of course, he caught me in the lie by asking me who the promoter was in Florida that I wrestled for. I had no idea. But I was also working at a radio station at the time, and I was a DJ, and I instead of getting blown off, I promised the guy that if I could get the opportunity to wrestle, that I could plug his matches on the radio without him having to pay for it. So next thing you know, I was booked in my first match in West Memphis, Arkansas, and Jackie Fargo was more or less my mentor. He was a big fan favorite. He was a hero throughout the Memphis and Mid-South area, and he was my favorite wrestler to watch. And then it was just like to actually finally get to meet Jackie and get to know him, and Jackie was the guy who stuck his neck out for me after I'd started wrestling over in the little small organization in West Memphis, Arkansas. Jackie stuck his neck out and went to the main promoter there in Memphis, who was a guy by the name of Nick Goulis, and said, Nick, I got a kid down here that I think you should take a look at. I was known more or less as a guy that would be a fighter more so than a wrestler. And my big move that I perfected over the years, and that was my finishing maneuver, finishing hold, so to speak, was the pile driver. And that really came into prominence when I used it on Andy Kaufman, and it caught on. It was seen all around the world, and so I started using the pile driver then as my, the King's, when the King put a pile driver on somebody, that was definitely the end of the match. It's funny, still to this day, when people talk about Jerry the King Lawler, hardcore wrestling fans and people that are just casual wrestling fans and people that really don't even know much at all about wrestling still know and think of my most famous or infamous match as being the match that I had with Andy Kaufman. And of course, Andy Kaufman wasn't a wrestler. He was the Lotka, the star of the TV show Taxi at the time, and had been on in all sorts of comedy shows, Saturday Night Live and that sort of thing. And Andy was a huge wrestling fan, and he fancied himself a wrestler, but of course he didn't think he was tough enough to wrestle men, so he challenged women to wrestling matches and declared himself the intergender wrestling champion. And so Andy came down to Memphis, and basically all Andy wanted to do was wrestle a woman in front of a wrestling crowd. He did that. He fell in love with it. Andy actually once told me, he said, I would give up everything that I'm doing in Hollywood, give up Taxi, all the comedy clubs, anything, if I could just stay involved with wrestling. That's how much he loved it. So I came up with the idea. I basically was trying to get the rub off of Andy Kaufman. I came up with the idea that Andy have his first ever match with a man, and that man was going to be me, and so that's how that match came about. Andy got a couple of pile drivers from me in that match, and he wound up spending 3 days in traction in a hospital here in Memphis, and that news and the footage of that match went out all over the world. It was on the front page of the New York Times, and eventually, of course, Andy and I wound up on the David Letterman show, and I like to think that Andy and I broke a lot of ground. We set some trends there. I think Jerry Springer might have been in the audience that night and realized that he was seeing a good thing when I became the first ever talk show guest to strike another guest on network television. Because that's where, I ended up slapping Andy's face, knocked him right out of his chair in front of David Letterman. David had no idea what was taking place. He was in shock. The whole audience was in shock. The world was in shock. That was recently voted by Entertainment Weekly as one of the top 100 moments in the history of television. So without a doubt, that's probably the most famous match or the best-known match that I've ever been involved in. Because you still see it 20 years later. They show it like once a week on Comedy Central. It's on A&E. It's on the E! Network. And, of course, we made a movie about it, Man on the Moon, starring Jim Carrey and yours truly as the King. Well, let me just say this about this match that we're going to have tonight. On the dotted line to step into the ring with the King of Wrestling. That's right, me, Jerry the King Lawler. And what I'm going to do to you tonight is not going to be a pretty sight. I don't know if you've ever seen your own blood, but it makes a man feel different about himself when he looks down and realizes that blood is oozing out of his head. That's what's in store for you tonight. When we get through with that match, you're going to realize, once and for all, why all the world calls me the King. And that's a promise.
You know, nowadays, if you talk to a wrestler, if they do an interview with him, the first thing that come up is, what's your gimmick? Or you're this gimmick. Well, that's what was so unique and different about me. First of all, I didn't have a gimmick. The gimmick I had was me. That is truly me, the way I acted. The intensity, to be ferocious, to be aggressive. When a guy's down, I'd kick him. I'd kick him harder. I had a bodybuilder's body, 20 and a half inch arms. Body fat of 5% or less. And I used this and I incorporated that, which made me so much different than anybody else. And that's why I hold so many records today. The largest attendance that ever watched an outdoor wrestling match was myself and Hulk Hogan. 78,000 people, still stands today. I owe a lot to Eddie Graham for giving me that opportunity, and also for Hiro Masuda, who trained me for 8 months. 5 days a week, and put me through you know what. And it was the toughest thing that I've ever done. I mean, I've been to 4 days in the NFL camps, same thing in college, high school. It didn't come close to what they put me through. They tested me. They tested my will. They wanted to see if I was tough enough. They knew I was an athlete, but they didn't know if I had what it took to be a professional wrestler. To wrestle in front of the largest crowd ever in professional wrestling outdoors in Toronto, Canada, was one of the big thrills. But I think most of all might have been the first time I went to Madison Square Garden, sold it out. First WrestleMania, probably the best WrestleMania that there ever will be. It's just the hype and the electricity everywhere in the United States that we used to go for that first WrestleMania. It was amazing. You would have thought that it was a heavyweight fight. One time an old fella told me, he said, if you don't say who you are and if you can't show them who you are in the ring, then you'll never really mount to nothing. And that's how I took that. So every night when I went out there, I made it a point to outshine anybody in the ring. I made all the attention on me. I didn't even care about anybody else. It was all about me. Because I knew down the road, it was money in the bank. And that's what I did. A lot of my moves and everything that I did was totally different than the way it used to be. And that's why I think I helped change what wrestling is today. And of course, it needs another change, and that's to be back the way I was in the 80s. If you're going to get in this business, you need to bring something to the table. If you're 5'9" and you're 5'6", or you're 6 foot and you got a 38-inch waist and you're fat and you don't work out, come on, man, get real with yourself. Do you think people are going to come and pay to watch you wrestle? You got to be something special. You got to be a giant. You got to have 20-inch arms. You got to be a freak. Was there anybody that was equal to me as far as talent, being aggressive, being vicious, or any of these things? It would have to be a person that possibly played college football, or even pro football, that had that intensity, that had that will to win. Maybe somebody that might have been an Army Ranger or in the Navy SEALs. It would have to be somebody of that caliber to even tickle my feathers. Everybody else was it was just another walk in the park. But I liked a good tough match, and I only had a couple of them in my 25 years of wrestling, and both of them were against myself. The first time that I wrestled Hulk Hogan, I believe it was in Poughkeepsie, New York, at a TB, and we were partners at the time. But he got the big head, He wouldn't call me back when I left messages, and finally when we got to the ring, and one thing led to another. They ended up carrying him out in a stretcher after I pile drove him. And I would say from that time on, and that was, I like that because I like hurting people to start with. And doing that for him and just to teach him a lesson that his mom and daddy should have done a long time ago, and I had to do it. So in other words, you want me just to go off again, is that it? Well, let me tell you something, Hogan. If I tell you a mosquito can pull a plow, hook him up. If there's two things that I can't stand, is a dog chasing cars and a broken down wrestler chasing me. Hogan, you got a little of both in you. I'm going to break you and I'm going to spank you like your mama should have done a long time ago.
Because nobody's beautiful as Pauk.
Have a clean match, kick in, and kick it in.
The only thing they have to do is put their shoes on and get in the ring. There's all kinds of things going on that nobody knows about.
Wasn't my fault!
I grew up in the business. My father wrestled. I'm a second generation wrestler, more like a third. I grew up in the locker rooms, in the dressing room, in the ring. Other kids had jungle gyms in their backyard. I had a wrestling ring. So I played. Wrestling's been my life, all my life. Being a second generation wrestler is both positive and negative. For me, a lot of doors were open quickly because of the name of my father and my brothers. But at the same time, it was very hard because you had to live up to expectations. When you first start, it's a struggle, It's a big struggle. Mentally, and also for a lot of the boys, because you're put in matches that I know I was put in matches in Mexico where I wasn't ready for. I was put in semis and main events real quick. I wasn't ready for that. It helped me in the long run, but I just wasn't ready for that right then and there. So I had to fight my way, literally, in the ring sometimes. Because the other wrestlers didn't feel I deserved to be there, and they were right. Well, the belts that have meant the most to me, I guess, were the Cruiserweight title, WCW. The tag team titles with my old partner, Art Barr, God rest his soul, in Mexico. The titles from WWF, which were the European and Intercontinental, both of them. Yeah, they meant a lot to me, you know, because in an organization, they don't just give it to you, you know. There's two reasons why they give you a belt, you know. They let you hold it, or let you carry a belt, it's better put that way. Number one, because they want to make you, you know, they want to bring your status up. Or number two, because you can carry it and make other people with it. Those are great honors, you know. But I know for me too, you know, I got to remember that with or without a belt, I still got to go produce the best that I can. And a belt doesn't make a wrestler. A wrestler makes the belt. The wrestlers that I love to work with are the ones that bring out the best in me. Chris Benoit, he brings out the best in me, and he's one of the best in the business. Another one that brings out the best in me is Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio Jr., Liger. You know, these are all people that I've been able to have good matches with. El Hijo del Santo in Mexico. You know, it just, for me, these are wrestlers that have always been, you know, you have that chemistry with them that you just don't have with you don't have that chemistry with too many people. You can have great matches, but there's only certain people that you can go out there and just have that ultimate match with, you know. Talking about injuries in this business, I mean, you go through injuries all the time. One that stands out in my mind is when I tore my pec wrestling Dean Malenko in a pay-per-view. You know, and went up to the top and I jumped out on him. You know, he tried to duck and shoved me into the railing as I landed, but, you know, he just didn't get out of the way totally, and my arm caught his head here and just boom, snapped my chest back, and, you know, I just remember that one, you know, because I was out for 4 months with that. In my life, I've experienced addiction. You know, I have the disease of addiction, and I've had problems with drugs and alcohol. And what's important in my life now is God and my recovery. I take it one day at a time, man. And I'm thankful to God that I have a second chance at life, and that I have another opportunity to present myself in the ring and to give the best that I can for the fans and for something that I love to do. What I'm doing in life now is keeping it simple. The advice that I would give somebody that wanted to get into the business is basically the advice that I am learning in my life. It's advice that you use in all aspects of life, which is you get out of it what you put into it. Orale, Sid, you want to get in the ring with me, Holmes? That's it. What's the matter with you, man? You know, that's pretty brave of you. But hold on, vato loco, because you're in for the ride of your life.
My name is Scott Bam Bam Bigelow. I am from Neptune, New Jersey, aka Asbury Park, or my adopted hometown. I've been wrestling 18 years. I'm going on 19. I might have missed a year here, so 20 to be safe. Being an All-American in wrestling and having I would say a really really good, strong amateur background in sports, being a good athlete, basically. Being in the bars and working the Stone Pony and hanging out with Springsteen, that was all fun, but it got really tiring, and I wanted to do something with my ability and the gift that God gave me. I wound up going to a wrestling school, Larry Sharp's Monster Factory, and it was just rough, having no food, no money, living in the gym, training every day, just constantly wrestling, taking care of the school for Larry Sharp. It was a blast, breaking in. I broke in the hard way, you could say. I paid my dues. Back in the early days with WWF, we were working 60 days in a row, and on the weekends we would do 2 shows, so they were called double shots. So Saturday and Sunday you had double shots, so you would wrestle, and they would rush you to a plane. You fly in a Learjet to the next town, and they would shove you in a limousine, take you to the building, take you back to the airport, shove you in a plane, fly you to the next building, and so on and so on. Life in the fast lane. I mean, for guys that weren't married, there was women out there begging, calling me, you and you, come on. And then for some of us, it was let's just eat and go to bed. Because I was one of them guys, but it was just a demanding lifestyle. It was the road. In the beginning, Hulk Hogan was the one that I was his tag team partner, and just being around the business with him and traveling around the world and wrestling and main event in front of a sold-out crowd every night, and then just doing a boom. That guy right there, just really took me and said, okay, this is the business, this is how we do it, we don't joke around, this is serious. And by him showing me that, gave me that extra edge to where I went to work wanting to work and saying, oh, I got to wrestle this guy tonight. No, I went out there to try and steal a show every night. So the Hulkster was the one that guided me.
I was Bam Bam Bigelow. I was the beast from the East, the master of disaster, the man that put the word Kurtz in captain. But I came out to the ring and my outfit was all flames, my head tattooed in a ball of fire, and that more or less just accented my personality of just being a ball of fire, all wound up, all burning out, all whatever. But yeah, I'm just a fireball. I was the first big man, being 425 pounds, being able to do cartwheels and moonsaws, and just being really agile and quick, doing things that you wouldn't expect from a big man. So anything that had to do with running and flipping and flying through the air, that's what I enjoyed. I like to fly, man. I'm like a 747. Most exciting for me was being ECW heavyweight champion, where ECW Extreme Championship Wrestling, when they were around, was just a new way of wrestling, or a new storyline, so to speak. And being a champ there was just it was a tall order. I mean, you had to go out. You had to wrestle, you were the main event every night, and you had to produce. The fans bring stuff so you can hit another guy in the head to the ring, buckets of crutches, sinks, and computers, just anything that you could beat somebody up with, they brought. And ECW made the business fun for me again. But now I'm much lighter, much quicker, more stamina. I'm really looking forward, being 40 years old and just feeling great. The best big man in the business. That's what I want to be remembered as, a guy that came along, was doing cartwheels, moonsaws, drop kicks, and did things that they never ever seen another big man do before, and sat there and said, wow, that dude can move. And that's the best big man in the business. I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm 40 years old, and I hope you didn't count out Bam Bam Bigelow, because I'm coming back. I'm coming back bigger, stronger, faster. I am the beast from the East, and I'm going to live up to that. I'm going to be back. I'm going to have fun. I want all you people to have fun with me. You feel frisky? You feel like a frog? Well, you want to jump? Let me tell you something. I am Bam Bam Bigelow. I am the beast from the East. I am the master of disaster. And you want to play in my yard? We're going to figure out just how bad you really are.
be a world champion. Now he gets mugged on the way home from the grocery store. Now what? Howdy, folks. Hangman Tessalence here to tell y'all about the Luchadors Retirement Home. We got branches in Boca Raton, Florida, Flagstaff, Arizona, and lots of other places where professional wrestlers go to retire. Let's face it, folks, some guys just don't know when it's time to hang up the tights. And that's what the Luchadors Rest Home is all about. Your Luchadors enjoy sun, fun, pool, free drinks, a customized home entertainment center in every room. And at the end of the day, they can sit back and relax in sunshine. They can also enjoy our completely stocked fitness center where they can work out for as long as their arms will hold. And in the basement, we got our own wheelchair-accessible wrestling ring so that they can mix it up one more time before the great pay-per-view in the sky. So if you've got an old luchador around your home who's just taking up space, send them down to the Luchadors Retirement Rest Home. For more information, send a postcard to Luchadors Retirement Rest Home, Post Office Box 1155, Santos Muertos, California, 81009. Give us a call. Somewhere, a lonely old luchadors are waiting for the rest home. Bye.
I'll bring my guy. You have yours.
I've got Junkyard Dog.
It's World Wrestling Federation Superstars.
I've got Brutus Beaston. Here's Guerrero. I've got Great Hammer Valentine. Ricky the Dragon Steamer.
They're so real.
And Rowdy Roddy Piper.
Can you tell the difference? Wrestling Superstars. They're for real. Each sold separately from LJN. Yeah.
Animal being my partner for 20 years, nobody's accomplished that in the history of wrestling before. 20 years is a long time to be together. We're still young men, and we're still in great shape. You know, you can just take a look. You know we're in shape. And Animal's a bigger guy than I am. Well, Ole Anderson, who gave Animal his first break as the original Road Warrior and then brought me in, saw the movie Road Warrior, I should say, with Mel Gibson, and we just added an S to it. Therefore, we were very smart right away. We patented that name. And, he came up with the name Hawk and Animal. I wanted Guido. It turned out to be Hawk was better. And we came up with the haircuts. That was my ideas. Where Animal have hair, I shouldn't. And where I do have hair, he should. And so we could plug our heads in like a unit. And the paint was his idea because it was off the movie. And things just clicked for us right after that. I think that my early struggles came with all the demand of the road, 250 days a year and 400 flights. And then coming home and trying to fit in normally, and I don't think it was possible for something. When it was happening to me so fast, you know, that became unstable. As far as breaking in, you know, Eddie Sharkey broke in just he'd been turned. Bob Backlund broke us in, but he broke us in on a boxing ring, which is about as hard as the wood floor that we're on right now. So, you know, it wasn't much of a show. I mean, he taught me nothing about a lot of things that I needed to know. He taught me how to take a bump. That's what he taught me how to do. We used to beat the crap out of each other. It was me and Animal, Barry Darso, who was one of the Demolition, and Rick Rude in the first school. And four tough guys were pounding on the crap out of each other all the time. Paul is very responsible for getting us to where we were headwise. He was our guardian angel. When we broke in, we were green as green could be. You know, he was real smart. He turned the tables right around on them promoters. He was great. Real manager. The Four Horsemen were really, really responsible for a lot of our success. That'd be Tully Blanchard, Arn Anderson, Ric Flair, and then several others, Lex Luger at one time, and there were others that were in there at the time, Ole Anderson even. Along with Rick Rude, rest his soul, and Manny Fernandez, they did well with us. Midnight Express did great with us. We were lucky. We had a lot of talented people to work with right off the bat. You know, Ole Anderson told us, you guys don't know how to wrestle, guys, so just beat them up. Because, you know, if they don't want to come back next week, we'll have somebody else. So, you know, we didn't really know we did. We tried not to hurt them as much as we did, but I'm sure there were some guys that got hurt. But we really didn't mean to do that. We just didn't know what we were doing. Power, power, power. All we did was power moves. And that's what we still do. We still do the press slams, still do the power slams, still do the flying tackles, the one-handed fist drop, the doomsday device off the top. It's all hardcore. We don't do anything that's light and easy. Even our clotheslines are pretty good. Pretty good if you're me or animal. But I mean, you know, we've worked hard. We work hard. I had my left shoulder separated twice. I had my left side. My left leg was broken twice. Once the fibula, which is nothing, then the bigger bone, that was something. And I never did another back drop since. You never see me do another back drop. And that's about it for me. I've broken some ribs a few times. That's about it. I think the thing that means the most is nobody can duplicate what we've done because we won the WWF twice. We won the NWA twice, the WCW twice, the AWF once, the New Japan twice, All Japan twice, NWA twice, WCW, did I already say that? I mean, we've just been that lucky that people ran the ball, let us run with the ball. We just did a pay-per-view that was June 22nd at in Atlantic City Outdoors Minor League Baseball Stadium. We're doing cartoons, voiceover work. I'm interested in radio. There's all sorts of things, all sorts of irons in the fire.
Speaking of what we'll do to our opponents, me and Animal are quite fond of the medulla oblongata, which is the brainstem, which controls all your bodily functions, which means after we rip it out, you're going to be wearing the pins for the rest of your life.
Hawk and I, pretty much as kids, were always nicknames were Animal and Hawk. We've known each other since we were 8 years old, and we decided to get into the sport of professional wrestling. We wanted to do something that was kind of a motto of one of our favorite movies was The Road Warrior. That was one of our favorite movies, and we said, you know, everybody's always in typical wrestling tights and this and that in wrestling. I said, what can we do to change our gimmick? And Hawk says, hey, I got it. Animal, why don't you have a regular mohawk and I'll have a double mohawk, so it looks like we plug into each other, you know. So that's it, and then so that's how the haircuts came about. Our style is 110% nonstop. Go at 'em. We come at you hard. We hit you hard. We want you to hit us hard back. My favorite move, and I was known to do that throughout time, was press slam. Before top rope broke one time and it landed on my shoulder, and I dislocated it in the middle of a match. I had my manager yank it out and put it back in place. But I press slam. I was known to press slam all the big guys. I press slam Killer Khan, who was 330 pounds, over my head for 3 repetitions. I did Terry Gordy, who was 300 pounds. I was the guy that was known. I pressed Hulk Hogan in Japan when Hulk was 325. I was the only guy ever to press Hulk Hogan. We were the only guys ever to press Crusher and Bruiser, who were in the wrestling business phenoms, never went off their feet for 15, 20 years, and we press slammed both of them at the end of their career. I think wrestling fans, when I talk to a lot of wrestling fans around the country, as far as going as a most favorable match or most memorable match they have of us, usually the War Games scenarios come about, which are 2 rings inside of a giant cage, and you have to, and one of our my patented moves and my partners was to dive across both rings and give a guy a flying shoulder tackle. The worst injury that I had in this wrestling business was I had orbital rim surgery. A guy landed on my head in the ring, a guy named the Warlord, big guy, he's from Minnesota too. He landed on my head in such a way that my eye had popped out and had popped back in, but when I went in too far, my orbit was totally shattered. It went in too deep, so they had to pull it back out to its original spot, and they operated through my mouth and through my natural crease on my eye, so there was no scarring, but it was the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. The Japan ones were pretty special to win on a belt in another country. I think winning in our first world championship was pretty hot itself. I mean, that was pretty special. You know, here you are in a business that you look, and I watched at the time, and I watched Hulk Hogan, and I watched Superfly Jimmy Snuka to watch all these guys flying, and I said, man, here I go in my first tournament, and Hawk and I win the belts. So we right away went from zeros to all of a sudden now we're the top tag team in the business, and we have been for the last how many years? 18 years. Everybody's trying to emulate us. There's been many of imitators, no duplicators. If you want to get in wrestling business, I'd advise you to be in tip-top shape. I advise you to be in the best shape of your life. I'd advise you to shut your mouth and listen. Become a student of this business right away, because that's the only way you're going to succeed. Listen to the guys that have got experience and be very respectful. Don't think just because you worked out and you were a UFC champion or you were a national karate champion that you come in and deserve to be a wrestling champion, because there's a lot of guys in the wrestling. There's a lot of tough guys in this business. There's a lot of great guys in this business. But it's very much a pecking order, very much a respect thing. If you go in the wrestling business and think you know it all right away, you're going to get shot down right away. You're never going to get a break. So respect and attitude's number one. You got to be patient too, because it's not going to come the next day you get in. Just don't think because you work out and you go through a wrestling camp that you deserve to be the world champ the next day. I mean, timing, charisma, everything. Being able to stand there and just like Hawk and I were able to do, and just look at the people like this and get a reaction out of them, or like Hogan when he waves his hand and does the thing to the ear and get people to cheer, doesn't come to everybody. Or Rock raising his eyebrow, that doesn't come to everybody. That comes to few and far between. That's why only a few guys make it to the legend status in professional wrestling. When our career is at its end, or when the fat lady sings, as everybody else says, it's all over when the fat lady sings, I hope that we will be remembered as the greatest tag team of all time. Let me tell you something right now. I'm the Animal, my partner, the Hawk. We're not some Johnny-come-lately in the sport of professional wrestling. If you think you're going to get in the ring on your first wrestling match and try to make a name for yourself,
in 1960, off the coast of Florida, a man named Toshihiro Mifune, working for the Exogen Oil Company, came here and built one of the largest industrial parks in the world, taking a section of the Florida Everglades and transforming it within a space of a year into one of the largest, most profitable industrial parks in the history of the world. Was it hard work? You bet. But we worked hard at Exogen Oil Company, giving back precious little for the longest possible time.
Following his remarkable success in the Florida Everglades in 1960, 1963 brought Toshihiro Mifune and the Exogen Oil Company's small private helicopter to the South Pacific island of Oahu. The story goes that Mifune encountered some natives on the island who were not responsive to his ideas. We negotiated and eventually got our way. The Exogen Oil Company. We didn't get this rich by being apologetic.
As I was coming out of high school and through college and that whole transition, I thought it was a big joke. I was not a wrestling fan. I never watched wrestling. Then I got my degree. I blew my knee. I was planning on being a football player, making big money. Since I lost my knee, I had to teach. I settled down with 2 children, a third one on the way, for $4,300 a year. But my friend was a big-time wrestling fan, and he talked me into calling Bert Ruby, who was the big-time wrestling promoter in Detroit at the time. I called Bert, and at 2:30 in the morning, told him I wanted to be a wrestler. They were looking for somebody, so he invited me over the next day, and he explained the wrestling business to me, what it was. We decided that I should wear a mask because I was a teacher and a coach, and that was my drive and what I wanted to do. We put a name on it. I put a mask on it, wore a cap and gown, and we called me the student because I was learning the wrestling business. The Animal. We never come up with the idea of calling me an animal. The crowd, the fans, because of the hairy body in the annex, started calling me an animal. So one day I'm doing a very articulate interview, and Vince Jr. says, "You're making too much sense for an animal." It's kind of zinged me a little bit. So I'll show him. This is all TV, and it's taped. We can change it. So he sticks the mic in front of me, he says, and he asked me a question. I went, And it took me 5 minutes to answer his question, and I was really busting on him. This was kind of a rib. I got all done. I thought, well, he said, that's it. That's what I want. I went, oh, God. I was known for two things, and this is crazy. It wasn't about wrestling. I was known because I had a green tongue. The truth of the matter is I'd had a few drinks before a TV show, and I put some Clorettes in my mouth, didn't have a clue that my tongue was green, went out, did the TV show so the promoters wouldn't smell any booze on me, and when I come back, the switchboard lit up. Why is his tongue green? Because this is back when TV was live. The following Friday, I went to the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh. It has these big green tongues hanging down all over the place, and I thought, God, this is cool. So about every 2 or 3 months, I would eat some Clorettes for a laugh. I'm a little slow. But then finally, I figured out every time I did that, I got this great reaction. So I started taking Clorettes before every match and making my tongue green. And the results of that was really the best smelling breath in the wrestling industry. I had great breath. Wasn't much of a performer, maybe, but I did smell good. The turnbuckles became a fetish of mine, and it all started one day in Pittsburgh at a small studio TV shoot. Which this is old school now we're talking about. We used to get about 200 people in a studio, and we had plywood around the outside with faces painted on it, 200 people sitting in front, and we'd give away things like glasses sometimes, and this particular time they give away pillows, thank God. And the pillows were like these little couch pillows, and a lady got mad at me and threw one of her pillows at me. Well, I got the pillow, and not as stupid as I look, I knew that there was 200 more pillows out there, so if I threw the pillow back at her, that I'd have 200 pillows coming at me. If I sat on it, it was going to be a very boring match, so what are you going to do with a pillow? I took it, I bit it, ripped it apart, and this stuff just exploded out of it because the pillow was packed real tight. It was like one of those couch pillows, satin couch pillows. It was packed real tight, so the stuff blew up in the air. I took it, started throwing it, it stuck in my hair. I looked like the abominable snowman. The place went nuts. And Tony Puglisi, Bruno Sammartino's cousin, said, you know, maybe you could eat a turnbuckle. And we all just laughed at it. About 2 weeks later, I was wrestling with Chief Jay Strongbow, and he was doing all of his antics. I was doing all of mine. The people were sitting on their hands. It was just not working. The match really wasn't getting it done. So I looked at the turnbuckle. I thought, I wonder. I went over, took a bite, ripped it open, boom, rubbed it in his face. The place went nuts, and it didn't take me 3 or 4 months to figure out that wasn't a bad thing to do. I started doing that every night. But my greatest advocate was my wife, because I had to learn all these maneuvers. And I put wrist locks on her and teach her how to put a hammer lock on me, and we reversed back and forth until I learned how to use all these crazy wrestling holds. And I got real good at using wrestling holds with my wife in the kitchen while she was trying to wash dishes. Get out of here, she'd tell me. But then I'd get in the ring with a guy like Bruno Sammartino, and all those holes went out the window. I would pound on Bruno. I was a brawler. I wasn't a wrestler. I'd kick his tail, and then all of a sudden he would start this stuff, and the Italians would start coming up, and all of a sudden it was a dangerous place to be. And I feel pretty lucky, and I owe it all back to wrestling, and things like acclaim. They just keep popping up for me. I spend my time trying to help people. So many people in the world today are hurting and suffering in different ways, health-wise, financially. People get up every morning and go to a job that they hate. They work with people that they don't like. They come home at night and drink a beer. They don't have time to hug their kids. I'm helping people get out of that syndrome, and I love it. I mean, I've got so much that I want to give back, and so many different ways that I can do it. And I owe so much because life with God has been so good to me. So that's where I'm at.
You know what? Tonight, on Acclaim, anyone that wants to try me, come on down, Daddy, because it's the end of the line. You push the buttons, and I win. Bye-bye.
If you have questions or doubts about the paternity of your child, you're probably a slut. But that's okay, because we're here to help. For your free paternity testing kit, log on at whobemybabydaddy.com. Just one squirt, and we will dish the dirt. We've been serving the celebrity and reality talk show circuits for years now, and our fast service and accurate results are rated #1 by Gangster and Thug Life magazine. whobemybabydaddy.com for when you've got to know.
Hi, folks. Hangman Tex Lynch here to tell y'all about the Deflabitator. Made from a revolutionary new design, The deflagrator will help take weight off your body without any effort at all. Just use it 2 or 3 times a week, and the deflagrator will make the pounds and inches fall right off you. Hangman 6 Links is living proof. Now, if you want a deflagrator, all you gotta do is send $19.95. But wait, we're not finished yet. Send your $19.95 in the next 10 minutes, and we'll send you not 1, but 2 deflagrators. Remember, it made a man out of 6 Links, and it can make a man out of you too. So send away for your deflagrator right away. Here's how.
I think my gimmick was being myself. My name is Bob Backlund. I weighed 230 pounds. I was 6 feet tall, and it didn't take a lot to come up with that. And I think it got sort of special, somebody just being himself in the world of professional wrestling. I started training in Minneapolis. There's a place called the 7th Street Gym, and there was a wrestler there by the name of Eddie Sharkey. And they had a ring in the back of this weightlifting gym that they trained people at night, and I was training there lifting weights, and there was some people from the older AWA that were there. They asked me to train because they knew I had wrestled in college, and I was doing pretty good in the weightlifting as far as strength, so they were pretty interested in me being with them, so I joined up with them, and I trained for about 6 to 8 months. Finally finished up the training, which was pretty rough. And then I sent some pictures out to different promoters all over the country. Leroy McGurk was the first one that said, "Okay, come on down and wrestle for me." And he was in Louisiana territory, Oklahoma territory. The office was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's where I started in my career in professional wrestling. On February 20th of 1978, when I wrestled Billy Superstar Graham in Madison Square Garden. That was something that comes up just about every time I talk to somebody that's been a follower of the wrestling business. And after that match, I became the WWF champion. I was really worried prior to that match if the people were going to accept me. I came from Princeton, Minnesota, which was a real small town. There was only 2,500 people in the town. There was 2,700 people in Madison Square Garden that night. My favorite move was always the cross-face chicken wing. And the chicken wing has been in wrestling for a number of years, especially in amateur wrestling. It goes back to the beginning of wrestling. And then another thing in amateur wrestling, they have the crossface where you put your wrist across the guy's chin and turn his head sideways. I was the first one in 1982 to clasp my hands with both of those holds on, and that's why they call it the crossface chicken wing. The biggest injury that I had happened in 1973. I was in a battle royal in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and the place where I trained at, it didn't have a ring that was up on stilts. The ring was maybe on blocks, but only 6 inches off the floor where I trained. So I didn't learn how to take a fall over the top rope and land on the floor where it was a 4-foot drop. It was just going over the top rope, and then the floor was right there almost. It didn't have that drop down when the ring wasn't up. So I took somebody threw me over the top rope, and I went over the top rope, and I hit my hip on the side of the ring, and I got a bruise from my knee up to my ribs, and it really, I still feel the injury today. I have to say the most important person to me was Vince McMahon Sr. He put me in a position where I could support my family, and like I said before, send my daughter to the best schools I could. But the reason I liked him so much and respected him so much is because you didn't have to worry about signing a contract with him. All you had to do was reach out and shake his hand, and he gave you your word. I left Princeton, Minnesota with $20 in my pocket in a 1968 green Chevrolet. My mom and dad weren't wealthy. They gave me a big hug and said good luck. And I had dollar signs going through my head because I thought I was going to be making a lot of money in the wrestling world. I made a reservation at the Sheraton that night because I thought I was going to make all this money. Well, I wrestled. I sat around. Everybody got paid, and I was just a new guy on the block, and they paid me $5. And later on, I realized that they were trying to discourage me. They were trying to make me quit. They were trying to break me. But obviously that night I couldn't afford to stay at the Sheraton, so I ended up staying in the trunk of my car. And I got through that night, but then the next night I was in the trunk of my car also. It ended up where I was sleeping in the trunk of my car for almost a year.
I don't have an opponent tonight! I haven't wrestled for years! Where are you coming from? I am out of wrestling business! And the people still love me! They want me! I'm not wrestling tonight! But if I were, I'd put them in the crossface chicken wing! I thought we already had that discussion. You're a bigger plebeian. You're quagmired in a sea of hypocrisy. Get up straight out there! You're starting to agitate me, and I'm here to agitate you. Good night. Mr. Backlund is going home.
Well, excuse me, brother, but the first thing Hacksaw Jim Duggan has to do is give a big ho! Kind of fires me up. Gets the blood flowing through the heart. Gets the air in the lungs. Gets Hacksaw Duggan ready to roll. Now ask your questions, tough guy. Well, the gimmick I use, when I first started professional wrestling, there was a lot of fancy Dan guys out there with feathered boas and sequin robes. Nothing fancy Dan about Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Just a 2x4 and the flag of the United States of America. Kind of a working man's hero type of deal. Of course, one thing about Hacksaw, I never worried about winning the match, long as I won the fight. But when I was wrestling, I was WCW television champion, the only undefeated television champion in history. I was king of the ring in WWF. I was North American heavyweight champion in UWF. But I tell you what, I don't worry about them fancy damn belts. The only thing that matters to Hacksaw Jim Duggan is I win the fight. Tough guys! Ho! I can't help it. Sometimes I just got a hole. But two of my biggest injuries in professional wrestling was once down at the Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston, Texas, when the one-man gang ran me into the ring post and a bolt went into my head. Cracked my skull. It was a debilitating injury and almost put me out of wrestling completely. But the injury that caused me the most problem and kept me out of wrestling longer than anything was a ruptured Achilles tendon. And that was about a 6-month injury. Oh, question about it. There's one match that stands out in my mind and stands out in the mind of all the fans of Hacksaw Jim Duggan. That was Andre the Giant. There's only one man in the history of professional wrestling that knocked out Andre the Giant, and that's Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Tough guy, and that's what the fans remember. One of my favorite stories on the road is with my good friend Jake the Snake Roberts. We were driving down the road in a big rented Lincoln one day, running late for our show as usual. We're doing about 80 miles an hour. And wherever Jake went, he carried Damien, a 110-pound python snake. He kept the snake in a big duffel bag, and we'd always throw it in the back seat of the car. Well, the snake would always push against the bag, trying to get out. And one day we got out of the bag, so I'm driving down the road. I look in the mirror. There's this big, huge snake head behind me. So I slam on the brakes. We slide off the road, pulling a little gas station, and there's two old-timers sitting there rocking in their chair. And we jump out of the car, open the back door, start wrestling with this 110-pound snake, stuff it back in the bag, throw it in the trunk, and drive off. So to this day, those guys got to be going, what in the world was that all about? Well, I tell a lot of folks, a lot of people come up to me and say, Hacksaw, of course, they're 6'3", 6'5", 300 pounds, 24 years old. I want to be a pro wrestler. But folks, you out there got to understand, there's 1,500 NFL football players. There's 1,000 NBA basketball players. There's 100 pro wrestlers on contract this year. It's television. It's actually more competitive than sports. So what I tell kids when they say they want to be a pro wrestler, I say, hey, play golf. It's easier on the body, and it's more money. Ho! Boy! They try to put me out the pasture. They put old Hacksaw in a rocking chair on the front porch, and I sit there rocking away. But that's not Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So I work a few independent shows. I do some overseas shows, and I'm looking for a new company to start up in this country that will be a little more family-friendly, without all the obscene gestures and profanity. So folks, keep an eye open for the new wrestling federation coming out soon. Walk into the camera and pretend that I'm taking on some punk kid in a wrestling match. It's my favorite deal, because you know now, when they got these wrestling promoters that dress kids up and give them a wrestling name and say, hey, you're a pro wrestler, and they come out and they go, well, I'm going to go out to the ring and I'm going to do the best job I can. I hope I win. Well, that's not Hacksaw Jim Duggan's way. The way I do it is I put my grade A hands on my hip, I stomp on down to the ring, I listen for the bell, and then I do what Hacksaw Jim Duggan does best, beat people up. So I'm not some punk kid standing down in the convenience store with my hands in my pockets going, ooh, he's a big wrestling star. I'm 6'3", 275 pounds. And if one of you punk kids want to come down and take on Hacksaw Jim Duggan, I'm not a hard man to find. And so like the game show host says, come on down, tough guys.